I was placed into the arms of Pastor Munson, sprinkled with water, and given a promise to be called a child of God. My parents remember some of it. The details they left me with were mostly weather-related. The temperature was well below zero, and it was in the middle of a blizzard. The only vehicle that would start was my dad's red Chevy pickup. He dropped us off at Redeemer Lutheran Church, my mom and myself, and then he drove the 5 blocks to pick up my godparents. Their car didn't start either. My grandparents made it the 6 miles from their farm to church that morning. My grandmother, stubborn as she was, some of you met her at my ordination, as stubborn as she was, she made sure that Grandpa had plowed numerous times as the snow kept coming down the driveway. I'm betting we were the majority of the congregation that morning. This was the story that I heard from my parents when I called to ask about my baptism. My dad and Grandma both remembered that it happened on the baptism of Jesus, but neither of them mentioned anything miraculous or heaven sent, at least nothing taking the shape of a dove. And I've taken part in quite a few baptisms, and none of them seem to have anything beyond the ordinary either. I suppose I'm just hoping, just once, for a parting of the heavens and a descending dove and a booming voice of approval from God. Grace and peace to you from God's beloved Son, Jesus Christ, and the Spirit who descends upon us all. Amen. Welcome, my friends, to Epiphany Part 2. On Tuesday, last week, we celebrated the festival of Epiphany, and for some of our Christian brothers and sisters in the Orthodox Church, Christmas. Traditionally, Epiphany marks the day at the end of the 12 days of Christmas when the 3 wise men, the Magi, found their way to the Holy Family in Nazareth to worship the newborn child who would be king. Epiphany is that startling event of bumping into the divine. Epiphany is the day when Christ's reach, the reach of a small child, first extends beyond Israel and the Jewish faith to include those outsiders of the faith, like the wise men, the Gentiles, all the nations of the world who would also see and hear and follow this Messiah. But why do I say Epiphany Part 2? In Epiphany Part 1, God is revealed in this little baby, the Christ child, to those far outside of the normal scope of the Jewish faith. 3 astrologers from unknown lands laying gifts of gold and myrrh and frankincense at a bedside built by a poor carpenter's hands for a poor carpenter's son. And today, though, in the cold water of the Jordan River, Christ is made known again, a bumping into the divine, unequivocally, as God's own Son, God's beloved Son. The dividing line between God and the world has been torn apart as the dove descends to earth and Jesus descends into the water, and God is very pleased. Martin Luther paraphrased it this way: the pleasure of God. Here you have my Son, says God, not an angel, but the Son, and you have me as well. God can offer no higher revelation. When he himself preaches, he can find no greater minister. Now that's an epiphany. Spoken to by the Father, alighted upon by the Spirit, Jesus has been shown to the world with his true identity. He is the beloved Son of God. We learn who this Jesus is. God's own beloved Son. Jesus, the carpenter from Nazareth, is the Son of God, and God is very, very happy. We can hear the pride, the joy in the voice of God. This is my Son, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. A short statement, packed explosively with depth. When we hear the Father's joy, we can't help but hear the overtones hummed by Isaiah 42. What is this Son like? A warrior? An emperor? A sage? No. This is my Son, my servant, whom I uphold. My soul is well pleased with him. He will be a man of justice. He will not speak words of violence or take up spears or bows. He will be sight for the blind and freedom for the prisoners and tyrants for justice. And while we're still reading and reeling from this epiphany, he leads us by the hand to the cold waters of baptism and tells us that although the water is cold, there will be no earthly benefit from it. He tells us that it will even lead to temptation, as his own baptism would at the hands of the devil in the wilderness right after this baptism. And it would even lead to our death. But he whispers, I've been there first. I've made that water holy. I will be with you, and so will my Father, and he has called you by name, beloved child of God. We have so many identities in our lives, beloved. And they're powerful and important. Father, mother, daughter, son, sister, brother, boss, employee, bishop, pastor, student, runner, singer, athlete, joker, and other names, equally as powerful, have also been given to us. Crazy, ugly, fat, stupid, unloved. These identities are not as easy to shake as the list goes on and on and on for each of us. But there is one identity that stands out among the rest, cracking through the pain of unwanted names, blessing the cherished names, and giving resonance to all of those life-giving names we hold on to. Jesus, diving into the waters of baptism, promises us the same name that God has given to him. What a happy, happy exchange. Christ has given himself to the cold water of baptism so that we are also given the name, beloved child of God. And oh, how this name changes everything. For Christ and for us, the world is a dry, dry place after all. In need of the wetness of baptism and in need of hearing that it too is a beloved child of God. We think especially today, as our brothers and sisters in Paris gathered together on the streets to mourn, to celebrate, to give thanks for what is, to give thanks for what might be, but also to grieve what will no longer be. This name, beloved, comes with the joy of an identity that can dig in to those situations, that can dig into those depths and give a name that is more than just superficial. This is a name, beloved child of God, and a spirit that gets deep into our bones and casts us out into the world with Jesus, sharing the wetness of baptism and the name that God seeks to give to all. The bigness of the great ocean hidden behind this wall reminds us that the task is wide The gifts of God are far wider. The waters of baptism and the name beloved can speak to those places of hurt, of death, of pain. They can quench and drench the dryness of this old world. Our new identity is proclaimed in baptism and right now. The name of child of God. You remember when Forrest Gump first met Jenny, sitting on the bus, reminiscing? He says, you know, it's funny what a young man recollects, because I don't remember being born. I don't recall what I got for my first Christmas, and I don't know when I went on my first outdoor picnic. But I do remember the first time I heard the sweetest voice in the wide world. No one remembers the heavens splitting open at baptism. I certainly don't remember seeing it, at least at any baptism that I've been a part of. But if you listen closely, the miracle gets whispered every time a baptism is recalled, every time we begin a service with confession and forgiveness or thanksgiving of baptism, every time we get splashed in the tub, in the pool, or in the ocean, God whispers to us our real name, our true name, that can't be touched or washed away. God whispers the name that does not separate but draws us together. It draws us into unity with those hurting. It gives us an identity to outlast and overpower any other. Boundaries are erased by the water of baptism. No more Jew or Greek, high intelligence or low, male or female, black or white, gay or straight, friend or foe. You are my son. You are my daughter. You have been washed in the same waters as my son Jesus, and I love you with a passionate and a dangerous love that knows the numbers of hairs on your head. I knit you in the womb. I cried when you cried, and I rejoiced when you rejoiced. You are my beloved child, and amidst all the dryness of life, I am well pleased with you. Amen.